The conference room was too bright for what was about to happen. The lights flattened every face into something sharp, as if the room itself wanted to expose every flaw. My father stood at the end of the table, jaw tense, voice steady enough to hurt. "You're suspended until you apologize to your sister." A pen stopped mid-stroke somewhere to my left. Someone coughed, swallowed it, and went silent. My sister tilted her head with the well-practiced expression of fake offense, but the tiny smirk she tried to hide told the truth. She was enjoying every second. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just said one word. "All right." If my father had known what that simple word would set into motion, he might have kept his mouth shut. Because that was the moment something inside me, something quiet, tired, and long ignored, finally snapped back into place. I grew up in a house where silence was supposed to mean harmony. It took me years to understand it actually meant hierarchy. My sister learned that early. She cried once during a school project disagreement, and before the teacher even finished explaining, my father showed up with new supplies and a comforting hand on her shoulder. I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I finished my poster board alone and carried it to school the next day. My father called me reasonable, as if it were a reward. I didn't know then that reasonable was just another word for easy to ignore. Years later, when my acceptance letter arrived, a thick envelope with my name printed clean and centered, I held it with both hands. It felt like a future I had earned. My father skimmed the first line, nodded once, and set it down beside the mail pile like it was a dentist reminder. 10 minutes later, my sister walked in with an engagement ring, and suddenly the house filled with champagne, confetti, and phone calls. By nightfall, my acceptance letter had disappeared under a stack of party napkins. That was the first time I realized accomplishment meant less than spectacle. When my mother passed away, the imbalance sharpened to a blade. She was the quiet buffer, the one who noticed when I tensed my shoulders or stayed up too late studying. Without her, there was nothing left to soften the edges. My sister didn't change. She simply had less resistance. And so the pattern continued. From childhood to adulthood, from bedrooms to boardrooms, the roles stayed the same. Growing up, I learned to carry weight that wasn't mine. If something broke, I was expected to fix it. If someone cried, I was expected to be calm. If the house needed balance, I was expected to provide it. My sister's feelings took up space. Mine were expected to stay compact, folded, and polite. Even moments that should have been mine were swallowed whole. Like the day I got that acceptance letter, the future I had waited for, only to watch it vanish under celebration for someone else. My future disappeared beneath party napkins. That's the analogy that stayed with me year after year. And slowly I learned the lesson. If I wanted peace, I had to shrink myself. But the truth is, shrinking only delays the explosion. In the family business, history simply put on a suit. I built the development department from a room with flickering lights into a fully functioning floor. I stayed late. My team trusted me. I carried the fire so no one else had to feel the burn. My sister, meanwhile, mastered a different skill, promising things she did not understand. 4-week timelines for 12-week projects, budgets that ignored testing, expectations that defied physics and logic. And every time I raised a concern, my father gave the same tired line. Your sister handles relationships. You handle the rest. The rest. As if the rest was a suitcase with wheels instead of a collapsing building. I didn't argue. I documented. Documentation became my private language. Notes, timelines, risk logs, late night scribbles written beside a mug of cooling coffee. I held everything together because that's what I had been trained to do, until the day the pattern finally exposed itself too clearly to ignore. My sister made another impossible promise. My father approved it before the ink on the email even dried. I pointed out the math didn't add up, and he gave me the same look he used to give me as a child, asking for fairness. Patient, dismissive, confident I'd eventually adapt. Adapt! As if my entire job was to shapeshift around their mistakes. So when he said, "You're suspended until you apologize," and half the company watched without blinking, I realized something sharp, something painfully simple. I had spent a lifetime being reasonable for people who never intended to see me at all. That was the day I learned my place, and the day I quietly began to leave it. After the meeting, the hallway felt colder than it should have. People stepped aside, not out of respect, but because standing too close felt dangerous, like they might be pulled into the blast radius of a family decision no one wanted to acknowledge. A printed memo beside the elevators showed a new project chart, my sister's name at the top, my name missing entirely. Not an oversight, a rewrite. And so I did what I had always done, but this time for myself. I documented. I packed slowly, methodically, degrees wrapped in tissue, folders lined in a neat row. Every document I had created, every proof no one had bothered to read. It wasn't anger. It wasn't panic. It was clarity. I opened a new document, not to defend, but to finalize. My resignation letter. Then came the real work. I compiled years of data, contracts, timelines, notes, every instance where my sister had made promises that could only be fulfilled if my team bled for her success. I didn't add commentary. I didn't twist the narrative. It wasn't a case. It was a mirror. When the file was ready, I sent it with a single subject line: Project Documentation and Status Overview. Within 60 seconds, my phone lit up. Lawyers, board members, clients. I ignored every call. The next morning, the building was different. Whispers tucked behind coffee lids. People pretending not to watch. My father asked to see me, so I walked straight to the conference room. He stood at the end of the table, shoulders stiff. My sister hovered near the window, arms crossed, confidence cracked. The company lawyer sat pale, laptop open. I placed my portfolio on the table. Its soft thud sliced through the air. "I'm here," I said, "to finalize my resignation." My father blinked slowly. "You don't have to do this." I opened the portfolio, laid the letter on the table like a final card in a game that had already ended. The lawyer inhaled sharply. Suspension without documented cause triggered immediate vesting. My father had signed the policy himself. My sister lunged forward. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion." I slid a second folder across the table. Documentation, facts, truth. The lawyer skimmed it, face straining with each page. My sister looked at my father. "Dad, say something." But he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the mirror he had ignored for years. "You blindsided us," he whispered. "No, I simply revealed what you overlooked." My sister's voice cracked into desperation. "Who's gonna hire you after this?" The lawyer closed the folder and said quietly, anyone who values competence. I stood. My father reached for me, then stopped halfway. We can fix this. You don't have to leave. I finally met his eyes. I already left. Outside, the air felt lighter, almost startling in its softness. It was as if the weight I'd carried for decades had realized it no longer had a host. At home, everything was calm. I fed my dog, Cooper, who trotted across the floor with nails clicking like a gentle reminder of normal life. I poured a glass of water, held it with both hands the way I held coffee at my old desk. A small gesture that felt strange now, because for the first time, I didn't owe anything to anyone. I didn't check emails. I didn't replay conversations. I didn't prepare for fallout. The quiet wasn't heavy. It was clean. The next morning, I dressed without rushing and drove to a meeting with a new company, the one whose offer I had once declined out of loyalty. Their office was bright, warm. When they introduced me to the team, no one compared me to anyone else. No one measured my worth against someone's last name. They just smiled, shook my hand, welcomed me in. And standing there, overlooking the city through a wall of windows, I realized something simple, something freeing. Leaving wasn't loss. Leaving was opening. Silence isn't surrender. Silence is a doorway. Walking away didn't break me. It returned me to myself. If you've ever stood in a room where your worth was treated like background noise, let this story remind you of something important. Your life does not need their permission to change. Your value is not negotiable. And sometimes the greatest power comes from simply walking away.